Greetings ladies and gents, and welcome to this narration of the web series Solo Apocalypse. If you are new to the series, there is a playlist listed in the description, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 36. Solo's instinct warned me just a moment before the ground exploded and the world was thrown to dust. My head snapped back and something ripped at my flesh, tearing a scream out of my throat. I heard shouting faintly as my head lolled. It took me 2 seconds to realize my hearing was shot. 2 more to realize that I was on the ground. I forced my eyes open, seeing double vision. Parker was dragging me away, blood dripping down his forehead. His mouth was open, veins bulging, yelling, and I barely heard it. I followed his gaze and found Rickson racing, scrambling amidst showering soil and debris. Rose stumbled backwards, cool shade bracelet flashing. A veil of shadow around her. Stone fell from the sky. Small bursts of fire erupted behind them as I stared at Rose's target. A large, shining figure behind, struggling at the border of the ruins. Rose was unleashing everything she had. I saw Rickson throw away his spear. I kicked out, trying to master my limbs. Parker gazed shocked to me, seeing my lucidness. My eyes were locked on the enemy, a being of pure moonlight. Only this creature was no ghost. It looked solid, like a dawn and dusk-made flesh, an organic being of twilight. Area boss, Twilight Elemental. A being of twilight, a creature that exists between dusk and dawn, equilibrium in the moonlight, caught between the ever-bright and ever-shade. It's from its constant shifting, like the phases of the moon. Another boss. It shone in mute reflective radiance, a swarm of sunlight ghosts surrounding it. Its form was fluid, flickering between impressions of large beings, monsters, creatures, beasts, and figures I couldn't name. The only thing static was its size, and it was regrettably the size of a large van. I paused, organic twilight shifting in the form of some gigantic lizard. A pale blue pallor, a grey of the moon, an intense shining. I heard the vibration from Parker's shell as he hurled me towards the tree line. I rebounded off the ground, rolling to a stop, and then the ground exploded again, and the force pressed me to the floor, scraping across it like a crash of wave. I was dazed, breathing hard. My back was against a tree trunk, a handful of thinner trees near the tree line completely splintered. Parker lay nearby, unconscious, bleeding. I stared down at my body as Rickson and Rose slid to a stop nearby, getting a shoulder under each other of us. I was a mess. It was the most bloody I'd been. The pain engulfed me. Lances of fire rushed down my flesh, my torso. I didn't burn like fire. It was sharper, colder, somehow softer than frostbite, no less intense. My ears popped and I realized Rose was talking to me. My hearing was back. "Okay, Evan, can you hear me?" There was a roar in the distance, an answering surge of ghostly wails. "Rickson, I don't think he can walk." I tried to speak, but the headache assaulted me. A wave of vertigo, a concussion, I thought idly. Rickson had Parker's arm over his shoulder. "There is no time, Rose. Just pull him as best you can. It's a damn area, boss. That thing's guarding whatever the hell is in those ruins. We need to leave the dungeon." Oh my god. Rose was panicking, head snapping back to the ruins. "He was in the middle of that blast. That thing shot a laser beam at him. I'm surprised he's even alive." Rickson was staring backwards too, shaking, adjusting Parker on his back. "Parker was on the edge, and just look at him. Feck." I felt my world turn upside down, and I almost threw up. "Okay, I got him. He's lighter than I thought he'd be," came Rose's voice, practically in my ear. I heard Rickson's shaky breath. "All right, here goes. Safest route. Follow me, stay close." I blacked out for a few minutes because the next thing I knew we were moving. I hadn't been this close to death since the very first day of the apocalypse. I closed my eyes and wrapped myself in my mind, isolating myself from the physical unpleasantness, and regarded it with clinical eyes. I'd taken a hit that should have killed me. That was immediately obvious. Then I would have died if Parker hadn't thrown me from the second blast. My bones weren't broken, but my flesh suffered from those odd burns. I let the pain pass through my mental filter, a sharp pain more than a stinging heat, yet with the characteristic breath of some kind of nerve damage. I floated away from that, towards something else, something new, something helping me recover. To say that it was a foreign entity was intuitively wrong. It was a part of me, like an addition to a whole, no less valid than any of my limbs. Only my symbiote was specialized in one thing only: recovery. It had been working on the injuries I sustained from previous absorbing the clones, minor damage, all things considered, and under the bandages and that first aid effort, those wounds were already healing. But now I could feel its deliberate motions, the movement of my body's resources. A vague weakness came over me, fueled by my energy source from healthier parts of my body. I wondered how much of this was a symbiote and how much were the raw effects of constitution. I had 27 points in the attribute, a measure of hardiness, endurance, and health, a rough understanding of the attribute. Every point helped me now. The worst part was I couldn't rely on my clones. Anything I made right now would just be as useless as I was, and they would all instantly die back at the ruins. I could only focus on recovering, and so I watched as the symbiote lost to consciousness. It felt like tendrils of warmth suffusing my body. I couldn't tell what form my symbiote took within me, whether it spread across my body like some overlaid network, or if it moved within me, or if it was simply diffused into my flesh and bloodstream, or if it did something else entirely. I could experience the effects. The jolt of fear and pain I'd felt had triggered it, I think. It was working overdrive, taking my body into its own hands and molding my recovery. The pain noticeably lessened after the first couple hours. Eventually, I found the strength to open my eyes. It was dim, which was expected. I found Rose nearby. There was a first aid kit between me and Parker. My first aid kit. I vaguely recalled her apologizing in advance. She was tending to Parker, so I rested back, staring at the stars. I laughed a little, then winced, immediately drawing Rose's attention. "Evan! Don't move, you just got burns all over," she said, concerned. "Why are you laughing?" No reason," I said lightly. "I just, a good reminder, I guess, that death is just around the corner. For anyone." I used your first aid kit. Sorry about that," Rose said, checking my bandages. I felt like a mummy. "I know," I replied. "How's Parker? Is he—" "He's fine. Less damage than you, fortunately. I think he has some kind of skill to mitigate damage. His body's tougher than I should be." She glanced at me, predicting my next question. "Rickson's making sure it's not following us." "What the hell was it?" I groaned, trying to move. "A Twilight Elemental, whatever that means. And, I said, don't move." Rose chided me. "You're gonna make it worse. Just, lie down, Evan." She eyed me. "It was the right move leaving. We're not equipped to face an area boss. Not if there's anything remotely as dangerous as the Root Mother. Stay still." "I'm sorry. I just, I feel blind." I finished lamely, stilling. A single perspective is an unknown place. This wasn't how I operated. This feeling of exposure, of not knowing my surroundings, was this how everyone had been navigating the dungeon? It was sobering. "If I stay in a place too long," I trailed off, mind flashing back to the silence building, to the spider, to Horace in the hallway. "Relax, Evan." A hand pressed against my chest, forcing my breath to slow. "Calm your breathing. It's just another day in hell." I found Rose giving me a small grin. "We all get through it." I took a deep inhale and heard the rustling before I saw it. I tensed, then immediately relaxed. Rickston broke into the camp silently. His words came softly and directly. "It's sticking to the ruins. We definitely woke something up," he said without preamble. He saw me awake and nodded to me. "Any idea what happened?" I asked him, giving up and propping myself up. "We have to have woken it up somehow," he said. "It could have just been our presence that triggered it. Maybe the ghosts we killed." "It's dangerous," Rose said. "Some kind of shape-shifting moon beast more than I'd consider an elemental," Rickson nodded. "Is what I would say, if that didn't imply any werewolf," he sighed. "It's not a normal monster, that's for sure. If anything we've fought so far even constitutes normal. I'm convinced it's guarding whatever valuables are in that ruin." Rickson gave Rose a pained look, and I extended my sense of my mind. Curious. Telepathy. I think it was easier now that I'd gotten accustomed to the faint frequency of other minds. Before, it had been overwhelming. But here with so few people, I'd had enough time to practice some measure of precision when perceiving the minds of others. I heard his internal monologue. "How are we supposed to leave like this? I might be able to make it out myself," But Rose and the rest, not injured like that. If I went for help, could Rose manage? No. I can't leave them. Not like this. The thought of actually abandoning the group never crossed his mind. Only leaving for help. Not that it had never crossed his mind. I couldn't always be listening. But I didn't peg anyone in this group as the type to do that. Can they move? He asked Rose. I can, I gasped, reclining back. She frowned at me. Not Evan, at least. She grimaced and I focused on her. Not anytime soon. If we run into anything like this, it'll be bad. I could handle maybe 1 or 2 enemies, depending. Rickson doesn't have combat capabilities other than a spear, and he doesn't even have that anymore. The sleepy wood was only sleepy if one convinced themselves it was. There were creatures roaming the twilight everywhere. Not enough for constant harassment, but enough that any lull in the alertness would lead to a potentially fatal encounter. It was only a matter of time before something stumbled upon us. That quiet, unspoken understanding slowly slunk in, and a mood to match the twilight gloom fell over the camp. End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank our Tier 5 patrons and channel members: Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Aritical, Dragzoon, WRE, and Arcadian. Thank you very much.